Welcome, everybody, to the Down and Dirty Radio Show, powered by Polaris Razor. This is a very special, addition or drop into our radio show feed. If you're listening to this, thank you guys for tuning in. Obviously, good friend of mine, Spencer Lowe Sr., has passed away, and a guy I knew really well. We're actually, I'll talk about it on the national radio show this week. I was going to air this interview that I did with Spencer. I've only done one interview with him. This goes all the way back to February 1st, 2012. I had Spencer Lowe was a good family friend of ours. He came to my first ever remote show at the Blue Water Resort and Casino to support the show, and I was able to snag him in a 2-hour episode. Back then, I had Jared Tetzloff from Fast Aid. He was actually coasting with me at the thing. We were doing a fundraiser and charity for Fast Aid. I think Spencer actually donated $500 to Fast Aid that night. We raised a lot of money for Fast Aid. But, so he sat down, and it was the only interview I did with him. And it was, we're almost 30 minutes long. We started talking about his career and things like that. So I had to dig into the archives to find this. It took me a while. I was able to trim this out of that show, and I got to tell you, audio quality we were talking 6-7 years ago at this point, it was kind of rough, but obviously the content is there. We were on site at the casino in Parker, his hometown. Obviously he had Fox's here in Parker, and the bar and restaurant and RV park right there on the river. Had some amazing times with Spencer. We'll talk about more of that on the national radio show. But there was no way to fit this 30-minute interview without chopping it up and cutting it up, and I just wanted to roll with it. I haven't touched it. I haven't edited it. I haven't done anything. This was as it was back in 2012. So hopefully you guys enjoy hearing about Spencer's career, and we'll talk more about him this week on the Down and Dirty Radio Show, the national episode, which airs tomorrow, February 13th. So, thanks for tuning in, and hopefully you enjoy this interview with Spencer Lowe.
We're back live with you guys, and we're sitting down here with Spencer Lowe from Parker. He's been around the sport of off-road for a long time, and got him down here, and just going to ask him some few questions about racing past and current racing, and I don't know, let's start out. And how did you get involved in racing, Spencer? I mean, everybody knows you from, running the Nissan factory trucks back in the day and stuff like that. I mean, what brought you out to desert racing?
Well, I used to race District 37 motorcycles, and did fairly well with the District 37 stuff. And then I crashed real bad, and I was married at the time, and my wife said, listen, you're going to have to quit racing as long as you're going to. I broke a couple of collarbones and a clavicle and some other things, and said, you're done racing. And I thought about it for a while and said, you know what, I got racing in my blood. I can't get out of this deal. So I negotiated with her and said, listen, how about if I go to a car instead of something with a roll cage and seat belts? We talked about it for a few months, and that's how I got involved in off-road desert racing. And I was lucky enough to go down, one of the first races that I ran was the 1,000, and I happened to win it in a Volkswagen. And that just started the career. I got the bug and had my job. In those days, we'd work all day long in our jobs, and then at night, we'd work on the car all night long. And we'd take our tow car and had a camper on the back of our tow car, and take the tow car to the races, then take the camper off and use the tow car for a pre-runner. And if we got too many flats, didn't have enough spares, we wound up taking the tires off the tow car and being stuck in the desert for a couple of days. But those days, everybody helped everybody. That was the original Parker lifestyle that we had then, and I remember that from a few Barstow races. And some of the old guys that I raced with are still racing today, believe it or not.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I mean, and how did you, you went from, being privateer all the way to running factory-back teams and stuff like that. I mean, how did that take place, and was it a lot of being in the right place at the right time, or,
Well, in those days, it was a lot tougher for the privateers. And actually, I'm not sure that that's true. It's really tough for the privateer now because there's a lot of really wealthy guys who are in the sport that throw a lot of money at it. And it was the same way when I was racing as a privateer. We had the factories involved, and the factories were throwing a lot of money at it. So we were successful, won a few races, got lucky enough to get hooked up with a guy named J.M. Bragg and Ray Russell, which are Jeep guys. And I went to work for American Motors Jeep for a couple of years, and we did pretty well with the Jeeps. Those are the days of the short wheelbases when you'd just get the heck beat out of you the entire race, and you come back in, you'd be peeing blood for a couple of days and didn't know what was going on. And then won a few races with that, and went to Nissan and put the package together with Nissan, and did they put their first year program together. We had a lot of success, and just from there it just skyrocketed.
You did a lot of short course, you did a lot of desert. I mean, any one of the two that you favored more than the other, or, they're total different disciplines, all around, but...
Well, I did a lot of stuff, not just the desert and the stadium racing and short course racing, but I also road raced for them. So we did a lot of testing on the 300ZX and 200SX. I did some rally racing. I did Pikes Peak a few times. Basically, I was a factory driver that did whatever they told me to do. They said, okay, we want you to run 25,000 miles. In fact, one of the guys that's here, Jim Connor, was one of my teammates years ago. And Jim and I lived in Lake Havasu at the time, and we used to fly back and forth to the Arizona Test Center in Maricopa, and we put 25,000 miles on, 10 240ZXs to get them past the most boring thing I've ever done, 150 mile an hour for a full tank of fuel, get out for 5 minutes, back in and run another, 150 miles an hour. But it's a neutral course, so it wasn't a big deal. But I think my most enjoyable time was the desert racing. Desert racing for me was great because I got an opportunity to do a lot of pre-running. And I believe that preparation, in fact, my other teammate, Roger Mears, his brother was one of our mentors when I raced at Ascot also in sprint buggies. And he said, in order to win races and in order to finish first you have to finish. And I kept that in my mind all the way through my racing career, and kept in mind that you had to finish a race to win a race. Now, in those days, it was a lot different too, because we didn't have the pit support, we didn't have airplanes, we didn't have the communications, we didn't have Parker pumpers. So it's one of those things, and no headsets. It was pretty primitive then, but. I like desert racing, and actually I like all kinds of racing. I got addicted to racing, period, and I like the stadium racing because it's easy, and you can make a lot of money doing it. Desert is prestige, though. It's absolutely prestige.
Yeah, absolutely, and to run 1,000 miles in Mexico across no man's land, and to pop out at the finish line in La Paz. I mean, there's nothing like it because you really beat nature and everything.
Well, people ask me a lot of times about the 1,000. And I like the 1,000. I like racing in Baja. I always have liked racing in Baja. But the thing about it, I think that out of all the races, the Mint 400 is a much, much tougher race than the Baja 1000 because of the silt. The Baja is long, especially if you're driving it by yourself. But the Mint race, the silt and getting stuck, and they throw every possible thing at you that they can throw at you. And so it's all challenging. It's just a different way of looking at each event. And, that's why I'm here in Parker. I fell in love with Parker from pre-running it so much here. And those were in the days when you could pre-run. And I felt that Parker was that was the race that I would focus all my winter effort and testing on. And because I felt that if we won Parker, that would set the pace and the momentum for our season. And it did, absolutely did.
Well, and you talk about testing and working out, and I remember watching a video on one of the old. It was on one of I can't remember, one of the old ESPN broadcasts. They did a thing on you and showed you running on the treadmill and stuff like that, and you had this absolutely awesome. It was like a seat, and it had a steering wheel, and it had shocks hooked up to it. And I got to know, do you got it stuck in a garage somewhere or hidden away?
I still have that. It was really cool. It was a race seat, Mastercraft seat, and we had a resistance in the brake pedal because I usually drove automatics. There was an accelerator and a brake pedal, and I left foot brake all the time. And I had a shifter mounted to it. And then I had shocks on the steering wheel, and they were adjustable. So you could set the tension in the shocks. Because, when you're running solo and you're running 1,000 miles, as you well know, it's a workout. It's a full physical strain. And in those days, 1,000 miles, the fastest I've ever done the 1,000 miles in the Baja was 17 hours. But a lot of times it's taken 23, 24, 27 hours. And that's without any problems. That was the old days before the courses were marked like they were, and you might get stuck down in the lagunas, in the mud flats, or who knows what. So it's a challenge. There's no doubt about it.
Well, and absolutely. I mean, in this day and age, we've got GPS, we've got tracking devices, satellite radio. I mean, our traditional radios in the race car are 10 times better than they were. And I mean, you know, it seems like people at home know exactly where we're at, you know, and it's just nuts because, you know, 10, 15 years ago, you'd run the 500 and you'd be broke. And I mean, there was no communication. It was just, you know,
you might be
hoping
there
a
for
prayer
a couple of
somebody
days.
found you, you know.
That's exactly right. Well, you know, in the early days, GPSs weren't even allowed. They didn't have a system. They were military. And our radios, we did have radios, but, you know, the radios were only good for 20 miles. We ran usually with 12 chase trucks in the 1,000. And you figure 12 chase trucks, 2 semis, leapfrogging all across Mexico. Plus, we could only go 150 miles on our range. So you're, you know, when you're out in the middle of somewhere broke, you better figure out a way to fix it. And that's what you have to do. And I think that's the difference in off-road racing versus some of the other types of racing, is that you have to be a mechanic also. You have to know what the heck is going on with your car, not just how it handles, not if the shocks are packing or if you've got too much bump or whatever it is, but you better know how to fix it to get yourself back home too.
Yeah, absolutely. You either have to know how to work on it yourself or have a really good co-rider with you.
Yeah, well, a lot of times, like even Parker, for example, I did pretty well. You know, I was with Goodyear forever, and I would go single, didn't even take a co-rider, just like you're driving.
Yeah.
Because I thought that, you know what, Parker's so competitive that if you get a flat tire, you got to get out of the car. It's 5 minutes. We didn't have air jacks then. We didn't have all this stuff. You know, you get out a lug wrench, not an impact wrench, and the DeWalt's weren't around, you know, where you can buzz a lug nut off. And so I figured, you know what, I'm going to go for it. I'll go through the only place that really was a flat hazard was the goat trail. And you go through the goat trail, you take it just a little bit slower. Don't worry about it. If you don't have to get out of the car, you've won the race.
No, absolutely. Now, I mean, from when you raced until today, I mean, you know, you were in a factory-backed team, and you had, you know, some of the best, you know, in that day and age. You know, what's the comparison to what you see now? I mean, technology-wise, and some of the trophy trucks, and you know, even some of the smaller trucks.
It's incredible. Now, we started the technology with a guy named Kevin Bunderson up in Las Vegas with the position-sensitive shocks. And I look at these cars now with 4-inch shocks and shafts with 24 or 28 inches of travel in the shaft, and these cars got 30 inches of wheel travel in the spindle. It's incredible. I mean, it's just absolutely incredible how far they've come. The way they fabricate the parts. My son is involved in fabrication. He's showing me they water cut these parts out, make patterns, and blast them, and just weld them together. And it's sort of going, oh my gosh, what are they coming up with next? You know, where's this sport going?
Yeah, you used to, you know, everything was with a grinder, and you go and check and grinder and check, and now they just, you know, push a button and a computer cuts it all out. It's just
exactly. We didn't have any of the technology. I mean, if you had to make something special, you were going to fab it one off, or go to a foundry, get a print drawn, have the thing cast, then do a machine print, get it machined. I mean, it cost a lot of money for us back in the day because we were kind of ahead of our technology. And today, these guys are spending huge. Well, you know, I mean, it's huge money. The motors. I mean, you're telling me the other day 800 horsepower is not enough anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it's 800 horsepower out of an off-road, a carbureted motor. That's a lot of horsepower. So it's incredible where it's going, and how the things like a friend of mine, Jesse Jones, he's involved with an engine builder up in Croyer, up in Las Vegas. He buys a whole package. He buys an engine, a transmission, and a rear end. Buys it, puts it in his truck. They don't worry about it at all. Every so often, he sends every couple of races or 4 races, whatever it is, they send it up to the guy. They do a rebuild on everything, and off they go. Well, I didn't ask him how much it cost, but I'm sure it's not a cheap date.
Yeah, it's.
Yeah, I don't have dollar amounts, but everybody I've talked to that's running the Croyer packages, you know, the motor has made it to the transmission, made it to the rear end so perfectly. They put so much time and research into it that it works so well together that a lot of them that I've talked to have said they're actually saving money over trying to mix and match transmissions and motor builders because they've got it so dialed in, and that's such a specialty that they've focused on.
Go to his shop. It's unbelievable. And they supply converters. I mean, it's a bolt-in, turnkey, haul-ass deal. I mean, it's incredible. And you know, it's the same thing with the shocks now. You know, I remember I was thinking about doing the show with you the other day, and I thought about, you know, in the early days, a guy named Charlie Cronut Shocks. I don't know if you guys are even familiar with Cronut. Well, he won overall in a Class 9 car at Barstow, in a Class 9 car. But, I mean, his shocks were working, and he could drive that Barstow course flat foot the whole entire race. And, you know, he'd go, man, go. And look at us. We've won at Parker. We've been 10th overall in a 7S truck. You know, so that tells you the difference. The Class 1 cars, they're going so fast now, and the trophy trucks are they're just unbelievable, really unbelievable. Yeah. I've had a few rides in them. I haven't had an opportunity to drive one. And you go into a hole, and I remember driving some pretty fast cars in my life, especially on the road racing courses. And the biggest difficulty that I had is at 180, 190 miles an hour, you have trouble focusing because there's so much vibration in the car. And I look at these cars in these trophy trucks at 120, 125 going through these holes, and you've got to plan so far out in front that it's I have a lot of respect for these drivers, a lot of respect. I mean, you guys, you know, you got it easy compared to the early days. But let me tell you, you land in a ravine or something going 120 with one of these 5,000-pound, 6,000-pound trucks, you're going to be sore the next day.
Well, yeah, absolutely. You know, it used to be before, you know, and I know just growing up, my dad, you know, he'd rolled quite a few cars over and stuff, and it was one of those, you push it back over and you got a little bit of sheet metal work and you take off to the next race, and, you know, you wreck one of these trucks going, you know, the speeds they go, and it's a yard sale. You know, it's not get ready for the next race. It's get ready for next season type of thing, you know?
Well, you know, it's the same thing. I remember years ago we had those the big, tall Desert Jacks that they have on the Jeep, and we used to carry those with us with a chain on them so we could roll ourselves over. You know, if we happened to roll over in the middle of the desert, we'd have to roll ourselves back over to get back home. And I remember those jacks never worked at all, and you'd have to actually pee on the jack to get it to where you could get the thing working again. But those were the early days. I hate to keep saying early days because it really makes me sound like I'm old, but those were the good days.
Well, the good days. And the good days, you mentioned the Croyers. I mean, he came from the good old days of the Mint 400. You know, one of his early starts were up in the Mint. You know, a lot of the history, and I think it's important you remember the history because, yeah, in a lot of ways that things have gotten better and faster, but you know, not necessarily easier. And it's a good time. I grew up here in Parker, and it's funny you're talking about pre-running Parker and how it was the main wintertime focus. And Bob Gordon's house was across the street from mine, and so being 13, 14 years old, he wanted some ballast in the buggy, and just remember back being a kid and hearing the stories about, you know, side bets about who was going to beat who to the goat trail and everything else, and just running that series of the course over and over and over again. And it's nice to see the Parker 425 back as big and prestigious as it is to kick off this year too.
It's absolutely awesome. You know, I was talking just a little earlier today with Jim Connor, and we were talking about, and I don't remember what year it was, but it had to be 20 years, maybe 25 years ago. They limited the number of entries to the Parker 425 or 400 then to 425. They actually had a waiting list of entries to come race this race. It was that big a deal, and I just think it's fabulous that that's happening again with it. Number one, it's great for the community. Number two, it's fantastic for the sport. I mean, you come here and look at Contingency Road and go through all that. It's like the good old days, you know, where you see the guys pushing the cars through and everybody's crewed up in uniforms and looking sharp. The cars are in perfect condition. It gives me goosebumps. It really does. It's that cool. Well, so I'm still addicted to the damn sport.
Well, and people don't realize you haven't got out of the sport completely. I mean, your son's involved on the fabrication end of things, and I mean, you know, you're from Parker, you see all the races, and you also have a pre-runner that you go and play with too, and you know, live next to Jesse Jones down in Mexico, I believe. So, yeah, I mean, you're not totally out of it. You're in the loop still.
No, I'm not out of it. I still enjoy doing it. I've still got a Husaberg dirt bike, and I play with that. And I love the sport. I love the desert. It's just kind of a thing that once you do it and you see it, especially in the wintertime like right now, this spot you're at here is just fabulous. You get it in your blood, and you can't get it out. It's just something that's with you for your whole life. And I have to say that, you know, and as I said, I've done all kinds of different racing. The thing about off-road racing is the community, the off-road racing community. Everybody's tight. it's really competitive now. But it's no easier now than it was 25, 30 years ago. It's the same. It's go, man, go, and every man for himself, or woman now, too. Yeah. They got women riding, driving. It's a great sport. It's been great to me, and it's just a great, great sport. And I'm excited that you're doing this show, too, you know.
Yeah.
It's good also for the sport. It's good to keep the enthusiasm going, especially in these times of this economy. You know, it's turning around. I can feel it turning around. And I can feel the off-road cars, more and more off-road cars coming. People are bringing cars out of the garages that they haven't worked on for a couple of years because they haven't had the money. And just like I said, you get this in your blood and you can't. Look at you.
Yeah.
You know, you grew up with it.
Yeah, I grew up with it, and here I am. I mean, I just, you know, I love it enough that I wanted to start a weekly off-road show talking about it. You know, it's just, like you said, it gets in your blood, and, you know, there's nothing like blowing your nose after a day in the desert and having nothing but mud come out. You know, just.
You guys are such wimps now. Remember, we didn't have, and it's amazing, it's the Parker pumper. Why was that developed? You know, we didn't have Parker pumpers. We didn't have ear molds for headsets and quiet. You know, we had open face helmets and sunglasses, and get your face just packed where the tears are running out your eyes and they're just crusty mud, and your face, you're coughing, and you're totally covered with mud. You might wear a bandana. The bandana gets clogged. You can't breathe out of it. It's like, oh, those days. I'm glad those days are over.
I saw some vintage Mint 400 video where somebody had actually worked some sort of gas mask apparatus. I don't know where they brought it back from being in the military or whatever, but, yeah, they're cruising down in their, you know, Funko or whatever it was at the time, and full-on gas mask with their open-face helmet. They'd figured out how to rig it up because, like you said, the silt up there is just
terrible.
Oh, it's brutal.
Well, I remember the Mint 400 one year. We always ran just regular air cleaners on the engines, K&Ns, and they'd get packed up. We had socks on them. They'd get so packed up that we said, you know what, we're going to change our idea and move the air cleaner inside the cab. So the engine's going to breathe the same air that we're breathing, thinking that, you know, we'll be able to go a little further or at least know what the engine's going through. And I remember one Mint 400 that I looked down at the air cleaner, and we had a cone-type air cleaner, which is off a cat tractor or whatever. And I remember every time I accelerated, I looked at the air cleaner, and I saw the air cleaner moving. What the heck is going on? And the air cleaner was actually sucking closed. It was so clogged with dirt that we had to change I mean, today you don't do that. I mean, you just run them. Everything's so much more high-tech than it was in those early days. And thank goodness for the motors. Thank goodness for the drivers.
Yeah.
You know, that's really important.
Well, and got one more question for you. Ever any interest, I know not necessarily coming back to desert racing, but doing something like maybe the Nora 1000 they've got, and, you know, something like that?
You know, I had a deal put together. I got my old 7S truck that I ran 15 years ago from a guy, Javier Sacio, down in San Diego. And then I still have a half a dozen race cars. And I had a six-cylinder, an inline six-cylinder, with a 300ZX motor, a 280ZX motor in it, and I had that, and I had a whole deal put together with Goodyear and Nissan to go do it, and Nissan pulled the plug at the very, very last second, and I want to run that race. That's one of the races that I will run before I go down. And I hate saying go down because after Manny Esquera went down, you know, it's like, it devastated me, and you know, I keep thinking about that. I'm going to go out for one last race. I'm going to have a heart attack in the race car, but I don't think that's the case at all. And I would like to run Nora. Although the thing I understand, I talked to some of my buds that ran the race, and they said it was not supposed to be a competitive event, but it was. It was really a competitive event. They were going like crazy.
You're not going to put those guys in race cars.
That's exactly. You can't stop them. You absolutely can't stop them.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. Everybody says it was supposed to be, you know, just mellow and low key, and it just those guys are racing their ears off.
You got a bunch of cars. You got old cars laying around everywhere.
Yeah, we've talked about it. We've got our pre-runner that would be eligible, you know, 79 pre-runner, and we'd probably need to do a little bit of prep work on it to get it to go 1,000 miles, but it would be fun. We've talked about it.
It's
so
got a windshield. Your guy could even wear an open face helmet.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh no. Parker pumpers, you got to have them. them.
The problem is my dad, he's actually driven my truck, and he gets claustrophobic in these closed-face helmets, and he's like, I'm glad that thing, these closed-face came along after me because I would have never been able to drive 500 miles with a closed-face helmet.
Yeah, you get used to them like anything else. You go test enough with them, and you get it. And you'd never run an open face, would you?
No, you know what? For my first race ever, I wore an open face with a windshield, and it was in the pre-runner, and it wasn't bad, but, after you switch to an open cockpit with a full-face helmet and a pumper, you'll never go back to the other, and, there's no comparison.
Yeah, well, I absolutely agree with you. I remember, and I know you want to cut this off, but I remember one Parker 400 race here that it snowed. And we ran the California side and came across, and I had a windshield in the car. Of course, we had no defroster. The air cleaner was inside the car. The car's hot inside, and the windows were steaming up. And it was so snowy on the Arizona side that you couldn't even see the course. Half the cars quit, they broke, whatever it was, and we actually had to kick the windshield out of the car because I had my co-driver with a rag and a stick trying to frickin' clean the windshield so we could see where we were going. But there's a lot different today. It's totally high tech compared to the early days, and I think it's great. It's really great for the sport.
Yeah, I think it's been good. I mean, and there's a lot of companies that have been around that have been able to thrive, and because of the technology changes and stuff like that, and it's become a huge business really. So
it's gigantic, and it's good for our economy, and it's especially good for Parker. I mean, this is the biggest weekend of the year here in town.
Yeah.
And the pre-running weekend, thank goodness that Casey picked up the ball from Sal Fish at Score because he's done a tremendous job here on this event. It's fantastic. And Blue Water, too. Blue Water's, they came and jumped in, and that's, you need sponsors. You can't do it all out of your pocket. And the promoter's job with insurance and all the things that go along with it, all the staff out in the checkpoints and the safety crews, it's an expensive proposition.
Yeah, I don't even want to think about the undertaking, what it takes. I mean, I've seen a little bit, firsthand what it takes here in Parker, but, I just can't imagine really what it takes, and especially running a race like the Baja 500 in Mexico or something like that. It's just ridiculous, Yeah.
It's tough. It's really tough. And thank goodness that we have promoters. It's, you have to have them. They put their heart and soul in these events. And us racers, and I'm considering myself still a racer, we're lucky to have good promoters in this sport.
Yep, absolutely. Well, I appreciate all the time you've given us, Spencer. It was a good time.
Well, absolutely. I had a great time. I'd love to do it again sometime, and I wish you the best with your show. I think it's a great format. It's a great idea, and the more followers you have, the better it's going to be for the sport, the better it's going to be for Parker, and hopefully you'll continue it.
All right. Well, thank you. We keep growing every week. So
I know. Thank
you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.